Chapter 4: Asian Theatres. This chapter combines the performance of India, China, Japan and Indonesia. It starts with Indian Sanskrit drama. The Natyasastra, attributed to the scholar Bharata, was written around 200 BC. It describes the mythical origins of theatre and prescriptive criticism of acting and playwriting. It mentions something called rasa, which loosely translates as a flavor or emotional quality that the audience surrenders to. Sanskrit theatres were indoor spaces, equally divided between audience area and performance space. A curtain divided the performance space into two areas. One for acting and a backstage area for costumes and the dressing room. It is believed that some Hellenistic practices may have been introduced by Alexander the Great. Plays were written in the classical language of Sanskrit, which was used by the nobility. Very few survive today, but we do know that the most productive playwright of the time was Bhasa. Among the best known of his plays is The Little Clay Cart. An adapted scene from this play is shown in Baz Luhrmann's movie, Moulin Rouge. It is a love story enlivened by political humor. The most famous Sanskrit play is Shakuntala, by Kalidasa, who is considered to be the greatest playwright of the 3rd to 4th century. Sanskrit drama began to fade by the end of the 9th century. In the 12th century, Arab invasions of India established the Sultanate of Delhi. Under Islamic rule, the Hindu Sanskrit tradition disappeared and performance was no longer maintained among educated people. Folk dramas and popular entertainments continued to keep some of the traditions alive. This type of theatre emphasized the spectacular rather than profound metaphysical statements. Another popular form of theatre was the dance drama, depicting aspects of Indian myth. This form emphasized movement over the spoken word and included the well-known dance drama form called Kathakali. Chinese theatre. The civilization of China can be traced back at least to 2000 BC. The first authenticated period is the Shang dynasty, dating from 1766 to 1122 BC. It was followed by the turbulent Zhou dynasty, a period when Confucius, Lao Tzu and Mencius, three of the greatest Chinese philosophers, lived and wrote. Their writings formed the general background of religions and philosophies and practices developed in later Chinese culture. The Tang dynasty in the 7th to 10th century was one of the high points of human culture. At this time there was a theatre training institute in the capital, called the Pear Garden, founded in 714. The Song dynasty followed and developed variety plays as a form of court entertainment. During this time, a form emerged from the southern province of Zhejiang which became the precursor to Chinese opera today. At this time 4 types of characters were predominant. The Xiong was the male character, the Dan was the female character, the Jing was a painted face character, and the Shu was a clown. The dynasty that followed was called the Zhuang dynasty. It was ruled by the Mongol Kublai Khan, whose grandfather Genghis Khan had conquered China. Under Mongol rule, traditional Chinese bureaucracy was dismantled and imperial poets and scholars were forced to write for the general audience. Because of the complexity of cultural influence and the skill of the writers, this period produced a rich art. There are many popular plays from the Zhuang dynasty, but one that should be familiar to most Western audiences is The Circle of Chalk. It was later adapted by the German playwright Bertolt Brecht and called the Caucasian Chalk Circle. By the end of the Yuan dynasty, theatre was well established and a respectable art form. When the Mongols were overthrown and the Ming dynasty was established, traditional patterns of social behavior were restored. Educated scholars re-established their positions in the imperial court and their writing was confined to pleasing an elite audience. Liu was China's first important drama critic. He believed that a playwright should write clearly with a mass audience in mind. Liu was himself a theatre producer who ran a company of singing actresses. As a playwright he was criticized. Rather than use poetic songs, he used complex plots and sophisticated dialogue. Because his company was mostly female, he wrote strong parts for women. It is possible to say that he is more appreciated today than he was in his own time. Japanese theatre. Japanese culture is younger than that of China. By the 5th century, the southern portions of Japan and several capitals were established in the present-day area of Kyoto. The Tang dynasty of China had influence on Japanese aristocracy, and Buddhism became a prevailing influence. The earliest recorded theatre activity is in the 8th to 12th century. These are remotely linked to Chinese traditions and included juggling, skits and dancing as part of annual Shinto and Buddhist ceremonies. The first great period of Japanese theatre was in the 14th century, not long after similar developments in China, when popular stage traditions combined with scholarly pursuits. The Noh theatre came about. Unlike Chinese theatre, which was disdained by the upper classes, Japanese theatre was shaped by well-known, powerful people in politics and arts. Actor and director Kanmi was also a playwright. He wrote Sotoba Komachi, or Komachi at the Stupa. His acting troupe was considered one of the most creative. At a presentation for a shogun, he was approached and asked to be associated with the court. Kanmi's son, Zimi, became the head of the troupe and is considered to be the foremost theorist of the Noh drama. Under his direction, Noh became the dominant form of serious theatre. It remained so until the 17th century, when it was supplanted by popular forms such as kabuki and bunraku. Noh, as perfected by Zimi, is a synthesis of various forms. Actors are trained from childhood in singing, acting, dancing and mime. The plays were sophisticated, constructed around complex organizing principles. The stories were often from literary or historical sources familiar to the audience. They usually show a character as a ghost or spirit, working out its passions to provide insights about life. The main character, the shite, was masked as well as the supporting characters, or wiki. A clown character called a Kajin often wore colorful costumes and yellow tabi. There are two types of Noh plays, the phantasmal and present existence. Phantasmal plays involved a priest or monk visiting a famous site such as a gravestone or spiritual tree that is related to the life of the main character. A conversation with a local person reveals the legend of the main character. In the second part, the local person turns out to be a ghost or possessed by the spirit of the famous main character. The ghost's passion provides insight about life. In a present existence play, the action is centered on living characters in the present age. This second type had a strong influence on the more realistic form of kabuki theatre. The Noh stage is a square platform with audience on two adjacent sides. There is a uniform backdrop of a pine tree to evoke a place of spiritual significance. Pillars support the ceiling and provide visual references for the actors who wear masks that limit their vision. There is a seating area for the chorus as well as a footbridge leading to the preparation room where the costume and mask are adopted by the performer. Bunraku is the traditional puppet theatre originating in the 16th century for an emerging merchant class of aristocracy. The form is also based in elements of Neo-Confucianism, which outlines strict codes of behavior. Chanted text is illustrated by sophisticated puppets requiring 3 operators, one for the legs, another for the left arm. The chief handler operates the head and right arm. The most acclaimed writer for this theatre was Chikamatsu Monzaemon. He has been compared by Western critics to Shakespeare and Marlowe because of the quality of his verse and knowledge of society. Many of his plays were adapted for kabuki theatre. Kabuki is more lively than Noh and geared toward popular taste. It originated in late 16th century by a Shinto priestess named Okuni of Jamo. The earliest pieces might have been dances inspired by Buddhism but later secularized by intermingling with folk dances. These dance dramas were often romantic or erotic in nature, which raised concerns about the portrayal of gender and sex. Social unrest was attributed to the mixing of classes and prostitution in the theatre. This caused women to be banned from the stage. Women's roles were played by men from 1652 onward. Chikamatsu did write for the kabuki stage, but abandoned it because the actors often changed the words, unlike the shantas of Bunraku. The kabuki stage contains a revolving platform and a space for musicians and instruments. The audience sits on one side of the platform, and the footbridge, or hanamaki, extends out over the audience. Southeast Asian shadow plays. The theatrical traditions of most of the countries in Southern Asia were influenced by India or China. The stories were influenced by two Indian epic texts, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. In the 11th century, the shadow play became the most common and prominent theatrical form. It appears to have been developed most fully in Java, Indonesia. There were two types of puppet theatre, one using cut-out shadow puppets and the other using doll puppets manipulated with wooden rods. In the 1700s, the wooden doll form was used to tell the tales of the Mahabharata. Later a human form was developed using live actors wearing masks. These practices influenced 20th and 21st century practitioners such as Anthony Nartord and Julie Taymor. This concludes the review of Chapter 4. Thank you for listening and goodbye for now.